Hi everyone and welcome. In this webinar, we're going to cover the new features available for the new build that has just been released. So the build number is 8560, and we're going to take a look at the main new features and also some of the improvements that were made for the existing tools. So this webinar will cover the overall features for the main product. So for all of the products, Pro Wood, Pro Metal, Pro Suite, and so on. And then we will have a second webinar to focus on the wood features. So in this one, we're going to see the disassemble wall, horizontal split, and also the independent sheeting functionality, and the split sheeting. So these four, they are new functionalities slash tools. And then we're going to jump in the improvements for modular tool and then new organization for the panel's properties. So now here in my project, we're going to start with the disassemble wall. So this is a new feature that has just been added. I'm going to select my wall here, and that new feature will be under tools. So you're gonna see an option here called disassemble wall. And the goal here when you use this tool is for you to be able to split your walls into your several layers and frame that separately. So the idea is to split at the core boundary. So you're gonna end up with the uh, interior core portion, which is where you're gonna have your structure, so your structural panel. And then you can have the exterior portion of your core, so the layers that are outside of your core layer, and the interior portion as well, separate, which means that you will be able to generate your structural panels separately from your sheeting panels, and your sheeting will still be able to recognize the framing behind it. So even though they are going to be separate panels, you will be able to refer to the structural layer. The sheeting will be able to refer to that structural layer. So you can split the sheeting boards, for example, where the studs are, and not have them splitting on random places. So you will have this dialog box showing up, and you will be able to determine if you do want to separate all of those three parts, so core layer and then exterior and interior side, or if you would like to, let's say, for example, if you split the interior portion, but you do leave the exterior portion attached still to the core layer, for example. So if I check off those three, you will see here I am splitting, and I'm going to have the structural layer as one portion of my wall, one separate wall. And then for the interior portion, I would have the layers that belong to that portion of the wall that are outside the core. So in that case, for that particular wall type, I have a membrane and finish 2. And then on the interior side, I have the substrate, I have the membrane, insulation, and finish 1. So this will be one wall, another wall, and then the third wall. So it's going to be 3 separate walls. So we're gonna hit OK. It's going to tell you that we disassembled that particular wall. I could do the same for this one that is attaching. So let's go ahead and do that as well. You could also mass select several walls and disassemble them at the same time. And then you will end up with, again, as I mentioned, now what would be 3 separate Revit walls. So we have the exterior portion of the core, then the core itself, and the interior portion of the core. You will still have the original wall type to refer to. So let's say, for example, this one on the side, I still have that type. If I go to my settings here on multi-layer, I will still be able to see that wall type in there. So this is the one. But I will also see the new ones that are only part of that original panel, original wall. So in that case, as you can see here, I see only the interior portion of that wall. the core portion and then the exterior portion as well. So you see that they are separate, which will allow you to separately map them. You could, for example, still use the standard option to frame the structure and use the multi-layer one only for the exterior and interior walls. You could do that as well. Or like I did here, I've added just a default template in that case for the sheeting here for my substrate for the exterior portion. For the interior one, I am still using multi-layer. You can also do that as well. It's not a problem. You can just go ahead and assign your structural template to the structural layer. And for the interior portion, I've assigned also the same sheeting template, just as an example. Okay, so on your end, you will see this, if this was set to none, so let's go back, hit none. So let's say this is done. I can go ahead here and assign a sheeting template, hit select. The first time that you are doing that, assigning the templates, you will get this warning here. It's just letting you know that we will be using the optimized option for the layout, for the sheeting layout. And the reason why is because, again, is to make it easier for the panel itself to get created, considering the structure layer that is behind it. So it will refer to that layer, and it will try to optimize as much as possible the creation of the sheeting boards. So by default, that's the option that it will be using. So it will be using this one here, optimized. Okay, so again, the process of mapping and creating is still the same. You will be treating those as separate walls. And the other thing that we could do before we go ahead and create the panels would be to use that other tool that is new, the horizontal split. And that could also be helpful to handle the sheeting separately from the structural layer. So in this example here, what we did was we did disassemble the wall already. So the structure is separate from the walls that will populate with the sheeting, right? But let's say I also want to split that exterior portion where I'm getting my sheeting, because I do want that to be two separate. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, let's do the other way. What we actually want to do in this case is have the sheeting going all the way, right? So let's say that could be a possibility now that we can separate layers from the wall. And what I actually want to do is keep the panels per level. So the structural panel, I do want to have two separate ones on my level 1 and level 2. So I don't want to create the panel, the structural panel, going all the way from level 1 to the roof. I want that for my sheeting, but I don't want that for my structure. So in that case, what we can do is we could hide the sheeting portion. So I am hiding the wall that is the exterior of my core. Now what I see here is the core itself. So this is where I would assign my structural framing, right? So this is where I would create the structural framing. And for this one, I do want to split horizontally because I want to create two separate panels, one for level 1 and one for level 2. So in that case, I can come here to, markers, and I'm going to use this horizontal split. So this is also new. You will also notice that for the other ones, the other split ones that we have, those are the same split options that we had before to use those split markers that we have. And for those split markers, it was renamed to be called vertical split because we are splitting the walls vertically and creating adjacent panels in the same wall. Okay, so this was renamed just so we don't confuse that with the horizontal split. Now the horizontal split, we are not going to use any split markers, even though we do have one to split horizontally. But this tool here will actually split the wall itself. So it's not going to assign a marker. It is going to physically split the Revit wall. So we're going to click on horizontal split, and then we have two options that we can choose from. We can either go by split at selected levels or split at picked levels. So let's try the first one first. It will give you a table with all the available levels. And let's say if you had 10 levels in your project, you could go ahead and check all of them. If the wall was going all the way up to the level 10, it will split into several walls. So each level would have one individual wall in that case. On my case here, what I want to do is split at my level 2. Then I will end up with 2 walls. The other thing that I could do here is also add a base and top offset. So in case I need a little offset from one wall to the other. And then I can go ahead and hit OK. As you can see, you will also see on the list any reference planes that you have. I do have an existing reference plane, so it shows up in the list here as well. And you could also split using reference planes, not just levels. Okay, so let's click OK. And as you can see, it did split my 2 walls. So I have one here, and the other one is here. The other thing that we could do is use again the reference plane. So if I do a Control Z here, if I go back, well, let me hide again the exterior portion, and I'm selecting the core. And then again, if I go back to markers, split horizontal split, now I'm going to use the second one, which is split at a picked level. So that will not prompt that table to show up. I'm not going to see all of my available levels and reference planes. I will be able to physically select one of them, and then it will automatically split. So at your bottom left, you should see pick level or reference plane to split the wall. So I'm going to select this guy, and then it will automatically split. I can just hit escape after it's done. And now again, I do have 2 walls here. So that's the, sorry, that one. Okay, so this is the core, and then this one again, the other core. So now if I go ahead and I select these 2 walls, and I hit create, it will create my structural layer here. It will create my 2 panels. So now we can see that I have 2 separate panels here. So the interior portion of the panels, if I come back in here, and we can take a look, panel 274 and 273. Okay. And then after that, I could go ahead and create my 2 other layers, and they would be my sheeting in that case. Or the other thing that I could do is I could just mass select everything, and then it would create automatically all of that. So if I come here and I hit quick create, now it's creating for my sheeting. So now panel 273 is my structural layer. Okay, so if I select this guy, I can take a look at the parameters here. If I take one of the studs, it belongs to panel 273. That other layer that I see here belongs to one of my sheeting panels, which I think is the interior one. Yeah, 276. And the exterior portion here for my sheeting, it's panel 275, which is this one. And as you can see, if I zoom in, I see that even though it is a complete separate panel, so as you can see, the sheetings, they belong to 275 and they have their own parameters. That one too, it's an independent panel, so the interior portion of the sheeting is also a separate panel with its own settings, 276. But even though they are independent, they are still referring the structural layer. So they will be splitting and finding the studs accordingly to what settings you have in the sheeting template. So as you can see, it is splitting and my studs. So this will allow the user to have more flexibility. If I look at this in a 3D view, as you can see here, I am using that option to optimize the sheeting. So that's why my layout is being controlled by that. So it is trying to take the biggest portion here of my 4x8 sheeting panels, and it's trying to split as minimum as possible. But as you can see, this is a full panel going all the way up to my second level. So panel 275, which is the exterior one, that is one sheeting panel. But if I look behind it, so let's just go ahead and select all instances and hide. When I look behind it, I see my two separate structural panels, and they are separate panels um, depending on the level that I'm at, which means that I have now that flexibility of having the sheeting going through and staggering through several panels, either horizontally or vertically. And I can easily control where my structural panels are stopping without compromising where my sheeting is stopping, because before the sheeting would stop where the panel would stop. So, and it was, other than adding extensions to it, was not possible to make that extend or either horizontally or vertically. So this is just to add more flexibility when it comes to modeling the Revit model, the Revit, the architectural model, and also when framing as well. And let's say this portion here that I didn't split or did anything, if you would like to use the usual workaround, you can still do that as well. So you don't have to use that for every single panel. You could choose specific locations, or if you'd like to do that for all of the panels, you can do that as well. But the same wall, if it's not split, will also behave as a regular wall since as it used to before. So if I go ahead here, I believe this is mapped. So if I go here and quick create, it will still also create as a regular multi-layer panel, what the regular workflow that we used to. So you have those two possibilities. You can either do by that option, this new workflow where you have independent panels, or you can go by and use the usual workflow, which is just a regular multi-layer panel. Now the other option that we have is to split the sheeting. And this will also, again, it's a new functionality that will allow you more flexibility. So let's say if I take this sheeting board here, zoom in, and now I'm gonna go under operations, and I have this option here, split sheeting panel. So if I look at, again, my bottom left, I see that it's asking me to select a sheeting panel to split. So again, I'm going to select this one. And now I can pick on any point here, and it will pick that specific location to create my two axes. So I have an X and Y axis, and it's going to just ask me where I want to split. So this is the orientation of the split. So I pick any point, and then I pick the orientation. I could also have some existing model lines to help me determine where exactly I need to click and to the point that I need to select. So let's say if I want to split this horizontally, so I'm going to split on the x-axis, and then you would have two separate boards. So it's very simple, as you can see. But you do have to run edits 1 to save that to your panel. So now that it is split, you have to come back to operations and use the edits 1 in multi-layer, so this edits 1. And then just like that, you are able to save some manual edits here to your boards. So now if I select this panel here and regen, it will survive regeneration. And it's just another way that you could add, that you can modify your sheeting boards easily. And now, one other option that it is also very, very helpful is that now we have available a BIMSF template parameter. So before, and this is also valid for standard panels. So let's say, let me select here another wall, just a simple wall. Maybe this one here on the side, this one. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a standard panel. Because for multi-layer panels, we know that once we create them, by default, they are logged to template. So there are ways of knowing which template was used. You just have to go to panels properties and check that. By default, it will be information that it's available if it is logged to the template. Same thing goes if it's a standard panel and it is logged to the template when you are using the quick create, the standard quick create. You also have that option to log to the template. But before, when we were creating just instance panels where we were just referring to a template, but they were not logged to the template, it was not possible to determine which template was used afterwards, after the panel gets created, if it's not locked. And now we do have that possibility. We have this new BIMSF template parameter that will tell you which template was used to create that panel originally. So it makes our lives easier to determine in case you want to find out which template was used. You just have to check the BIMSF template parameter. And that parameter will be in the walls, okay? So after you create a panel, it will populate in the wall. So you have to select the wall and then check the instance parameters. Perfect. So next option will be now the improvements. The improvements, one of them will be for modular tool. So I have here on the site a few groups, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a few panels here. And this is valid for both multi-layer or standard panels. So before, we had an option to convert this and create a relation between parent panels and child panels. So the original panels that were created in the original group will be the parent. And then after that, you could create, when you push the same panels to identical members, those panels could be children. So they would have that relation to know which one was the original panels, which ones are the children that are related to the parent panels. But we didn't have an option to not have them locked. They were locked before and you couldn't unlock, otherwise you would break the groups. So now we do have an option. If I come here to modular, I'm going to say again, copy members on all identical groups. And now we do have this option here to either lock or not lock the panels. So you could potentially use this parent settings option now, and you can have that set up as being the source panel as a parent panel, and the other ones will be children, but they would not be locked if you don't want them to be locked. So if I just go ahead and click OK, oops, I'm so sorry. I think I selected the wrong group. Okay, click OK. Okay, and there it is. If I select one of the members, I see that it tells me which panel is my parent panel. It is telling me that this is a child panel, so it belongs. It's referring to the parent, which is 279. But as you can see, it is not locked. So you could make modifications if you'd like to. You don't have to unlock. You wouldn't break the group. And now the other improvements, are within the panels properties. So again, let's say if I pick one of these panels here and I go to panels properties, you will notice that the structural tab has less options now, both general info and structural tab, because some of the options were moved to some related options within the miscellaneous tab. So for example, the first stud offset, it was, I believe it was here before in the structural tab, and now it is available within the studs feature in the miscellaneous tab, which makes more sense now. It's easier to remember every time you go in the studs to change the stud spacing. You also have the first stud offset here available for you to change. The other ones are going to be under tracks. So we have a few options here. Before we had the deflection top gap available, but the gap for the bottom of the panel was already also in another location. Now they are both on the same location. So you can add a deflection bottom gap to the bottom of your panel and a top gap to the top of the panel. So this, again, would be more for light gauge. And then we also have this option to split the bottom track. So it will be here as well. And the eave angle will also be available here now instead of in the structural tab. And the last option that was moved was within horizontals. We've added the split horizontals to, split horizontal studs to the horizontals command. And also before, I believe it was in structural, if I'm not mistaken. And now it is available within the horizontals command, so you don't have to go back and forth. It's going to be available here, and it will automatically split the horizontal studs once you check that off. Okay, so that was it for this webinar. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We can take a look at some questions. So feel free to ask some questions, and we will get back to you with the reply as soon as possible. Thank you so much and have a nice day.